Commander Zixthal stood before the immaculate viewing window of the Galactic Military Academy's Epsilon Wing, his four arms crossed in what his species considered the ultimate expression of disapproval. His crystalline exoskeleton caught the light of 3 different suns, creating a rainbow of disapproving colors that perfectly matched his mood. "You must be joking," he said, all 3 of his eyes blinking in rapid succession. "This has to be some sort of administrative error. Perhaps the quantum computers are malfunctioning again? I told them we should have stayed with good old-fashioned photonic processors, but no, everyone wanted to be cutting edge." Admiral Velox, her gelatinous form rippling with barely contained amusement, handed him another quantum tablet. "I assure you, Commander, this is no error. Cadet Jack Martinez has been specifically assigned to your advanced training group. His test scores were quite remarkable." Remarkable Zixthal's secondary arms threw themselves up in exasperation, while his primary arms continued their crossed position of protest. "Of course they're remarkable. The human probably broke every testing parameter we had. They always do. Do you remember what happened during the standard gravity assessment?" "Now, Commander." "They had to rebuild the entire testing chamber. Who even thinks to use varying gravity fields as a propulsion method? It's absolutely barbaric." The Admiral's translucent form shifted to a shade of pleased purple. Creative, though. Creative Zixthal's exoskeleton turned a particularly alarming shade of orange. The last time we allowed a human to be creative in a training exercise, they invented something they called space parkour. We're still finding scorch marks on the outer hull, and nobody can explain how they got there. Through the viewing window, they could see the pride of the Academy, the most advanced training facility in known space. The omnidirectional combat chamber, or as the humans annoyingly insisted on calling it, the fun box, gleamed with all the latest innovations in holographic technology and gravitational manipulation. "Your new class begins in exactly 47 minutes, Commander Admiral Velox said, her form now definitely rippling with suppressed laughter. "I suggest you prepare yourself mentally. Oh, and do try to remember what happened to Commander Pixie when he underestimated his human trainee." Zixthal's carapace paled. That was different. No one could have predicted that a human would consider the waste disposal unit a viable escape route. And yet, it worked. The Admiral began to ooze toward the door. "Oh, and Commander, do keep in mind that young Martinez has already broken several Academy records." "Let me guess," Zixthal said dryly, "all of them involving property damage." "Actually, no, though I would recommend removing all beverages from the training area. Apparently, humans have this substance called coffee that they consider vital to their functioning. The last incident report mentioned something about caffeine-powered physics violations." As the Admiral departed, Zixthal turned back to the viewing window, watching as his perfectly organized class of alien cadets began to assemble. They were the finest specimens from across the galaxy of Alaxian with perfect quantum mathematical abilities, 3 Zephyrians whose natural electromagnetic fields made them living computers, and even a crystalline entity from the Omega Nebula. And then there was the human, walking in late, carrying what appeared to be a container of the forbidden coffee substance, and wearing a smile that made Zixthal's exoskeleton itch. Jack Martinez moved with the casual confidence of someone who either didn't know or didn't care that they were about to participate in the most rigorous training program in the galaxy. "By the sacred crystals," Zixthal muttered, watching as Martinez somehow managed to drink coffee in 0 gravity without spilling a drop. "What did I do to deserve this? I should have listened to my progenitor and gone into quantum architecture." As Zixthal initiated the morning's first training sequence, he observed Jack Martinez with the kind of attention usually reserved for unstable antimatter containment units. The human lounged against the quantum-reinforced wall, still nursing that infamous coffee, while the other cadets maintained perfect military postures. Cadet Martinez, Zixthal pronounced each syllable as if it might explode. "Perhaps you'd care to explain to your fellow cadets why you believe proper stance protocols don't apply to you." Martinez glanced down at his relaxed position, then at the rigid formations of his alien classmates. "Oh, right. Sorry about that, Commander. Just conserving energy. You know how it is with Earth's gravity being 1G and all gotta adapt to different gravitational environments efficiently." The Vylaxian cadet, NX-427, vibrated in what could only be described as scandalized frequencies. That's not how gravitational adaptation works. I've done 17 theoretical studies on. Actually, Martinez interrupted, taking another sip of coffee. Try standing like this when the artificial gravity fluctuates. You'll thank me in about 3 seconds. Right on cue, the training room's gravity shifted wildly, a standard morning test. While the other cadets stumbled, Martinez simply rolled with the change, somehow managing not to spill a single drop of his drink. Zixthal's exoskeleton turned a deep shade of annoyed magenta. This was exactly why humans were considered the chaos entities of the galaxy. It wasn't enough that they'd stumbled onto the galactic stage by accidentally creating a wormhole while trying to make their coffee machines more efficient, a fact that still caused many advanced civilizations extreme embarrassment. No, they had to continue defying every logical expectation. The crystalline entity, who had chosen the designation Prism 9, chimed in with harmonious disapproval. I find it highly irregular that a species from a Class 12 death world was even admitted to this program. The historical precedent. Oh man, you should see Earth's Australia region. Martinez grinned, eyes lighting up with what Zixthal had learned to recognize as dangerous enthusiasm. Now that's what I call a death world within a death world. Did you know we used to ride our most dangerous creatures for fun? The three Zephyrians synchronized their electromagnetic fields in obvious distress, creating a soft buzz of anxiety that made everyone's personal devices glitch momentarily. That's quite enough about Earth's peculiarities, Zixthal interjected hastily, remembering the great documentation disaster when the Galactic Federation first discovered Earth. The simple act of trying to classify all of Earth's deadly creatures had crashed 3 mainframes and caused one artificial intelligence to request immediate retirement. It hadn't helped that humans had joined the Galactic Federation in perhaps the most human way possible. While every other species had achieved faster than light travel through careful scientific advancement and meticulous research, humans had literally stumbled into it while trying to create the perfect cup of coffee. Their accidental discovery of wormhole manipulation through caffeine-induced quantum fluctuations was still studied with a mixture of horror and reluctant admiration at the galaxy's leading institutions. Today's exercise, Zixthal announced, desperately trying to regain control of his class, will focus on emergency protocols during a standard ship evacuation. Cool, Martinez nodded, finally finishing his coffee. Quick question though, are we assuming standard emergency protocols, or can we get creative? Every other cadet in the room involuntarily took a step away from the human. They'd all read the reports about human creativity in crisis situations. There was still an ongoing debate in the Federation Council about whether to classify human problem-solving as a form of controlled chaos or uncontrolled brilliance. We will be following standard protocols, Zixthal emphasized each word carefully. The same protocols that have been refined over 10,000 years of galactic civilization. The protocols that have been mathematically proven to be the most efficient solution to. But what if we run into something that's not in the protocols, Martinez asked, with that terrifyingly innocent expression that humans had somehow weaponized into a form of psychological warfare. I mean, space is pretty big, lots of room for unexpected stuff. NX-427's logical circuits actually sparked in distress. That's not how protocols work. Everything is accounted for in the calculations. Martinez just smiled, the same smile that Zixthal had seen on every human he'd ever had the misfortune of training. It was the smile that said, "Watch me prove 10,000 years of galactic wisdom wrong with something I just made up 5 minutes ago." The commander felt his exoskeleton beginning to develop stress fractures. It was going to be a very long training cycle. The first sign that the day's training exercises would be memorable came when Martinez asked if he could jury-rig the emergency escape pod. Zixthal had made the mistake of asking what jury-rig meant. "Oh, you know," Martinez had said cheerfully, while somehow managing to rewire the pod's safety systems with a piece of gum and what appeared to be a paperclip, an ancient Earth fastening device that had inexplicably become the most traded commodity in 3 sectors. It's like when you need something to work, but you don't have the right parts, so you make it work anyway. That's not possible. Prism 9 chimed in frequencies of distress. Systems either work or they don't. There is no make it work anyway. Martinez's response was to somehow triple the pod's thrust capacity using what he called percussive maintenance, a technique that made NX-427 crash and require a full reboot. The second incident involved the standard airlock safety protocols. Each cadet was supposed to demonstrate the proper 27-step procedure for securing an airlock in case of hull breach. But why 27 steps, Martinez had asked, while casually juggling 3 emergency pressure seals. Couldn't we just? No, Zixthal's forearms had all gone up in synchronized horror. We cannot just anything. These protocols have been refined over 10,000 years of galactic civilization. Sure, Martinez finished. But hear me out, what if we use the emergency hull foam as a propellant to shoot ourselves back to the ship while simultaneously sealing the breach? The Zephyrians, who had been maintaining perfect formation, suddenly generated enough electromagnetic interference to scramble every device in a 10-meter radius. That would violate 13 different safety regulations. They buzzed in harmony. Only if we get caught, Martinez winked, causing Zixthal's exoskeleton to develop another stress crack. The anti-grav obstacle course was where things really went sideways, literally. The exercise was designed to test spatial awareness and protocol adherence during zero-gravity emergencies. Each cadet was supposed to navigate through a series of floating barriers while maintaining proper form and following the standard movement procedures. Martinez had somehow turned it into what he called space parkour. "This is not a game," Zixthal had shouted as Martinez ricocheted off 3 different surfaces, used a fire extinguisher as an impromptu thruster, and somehow managed to complete the course in record time while humming something called Mission Impossible. "Of course it's not a game," Martinez agreed, floating upside down relative to everyone else. "Games are way less fun. This is survival training." How Prism 9 vibrated in confusion. How is this mathematical abomination survival training? Well, Martinez began, in that tone that Zixthal had learned meant trouble. What if we're being chased by space pirates, and the artificial gravity fails and we've only got 30 seconds of oxygen, and the only way to the emergency supplies is through a field of debris? That scenario has a probability of NX-427, began calculating. Already happened twice back home, Martinez interrupted. Though the second time it was space zombies, not pirates. Long story. Anyway, that's why I always carry a spare paperclip. The emergency rescue simulation was the final straw. Each cadet was supposed to demonstrate proper procedure for rescuing a stranded shipmate. The exercise involved carefully calculating thrust vectors, maintaining communication protocols, and following the 73-step rescue checklist. Martinez took one look at the simulation and asked, "Can I use the artificial gravity generators as a makeshift tractor beam?" Absolutely not. All 4 of Zixthal's arms gesticulated wildly. The gravity generators are for generating gravity. They are not toys to be. But Martinez had already begun what he called getting creative with physics. Somehow, through what appeared to be a violation of several universal constants, he managed to create a controlled gravity corridor that not only rescued the simulation dummy, but also cleaned up all the surrounding space debris. That's not. You can't. Zixthal's universal translator actually gave up trying to express his frustration and just emitted a series of confused beeps. "Look," Martinez said, helping a thoroughly traumatized NX-427 recalibrate their logical processors. "Sometimes you have to think outside the box." "There is no box," Prism 9 chimed in distress. "That's the point of standardized protocols. They are the box. The box is necessary. The box keeps us safe." "The box," Martinez said sagely, pulling yet another cup of coffee from what appeared to be thin air, "is more of a suggestion, really, like the laws of physics." "The laws of physics are not suggestions," all 3 Zephyrians screamed in electromagnetic unison, causing every light in the training facility to flicker. Zixthal watched as his perfectly organized training program descended into chaos. The Valaxian was trying to recalculate the universe to make Martinez's solutions impossible. The crystalline entity had entered a state of harmonious denial. The Zephyrians were huddled in a corner, their electromagnetic fields creating what appeared to be a protest sign in pure energy. And there was Martinez, still floating upside down, sipping coffee and suggesting they try something called drift racing with the rescue pods. "It'll be fun," the human insisted. "We can use the emergency thrusters too." No, Zixthal finally snapped. No more human innovations. No more making it work anyway. No more treating the fundamental forces of the universe as optional guidelines. "You're right," Martinez nodded seriously. "We should probably start with something simpler. Hey, has anyone ever told you about Earth's concept of skydiving?" The sounds Zixthal made caused 3 different species to add new words to their languages for existential dread. The emergency alert came during what Martinez had dubbed Extreme Zero-G Dodgeball, a suggestion that had caused Zixthal to seriously consider early retirement. Red lights pulsed through the training facility as Admiral Velox's gelatinous form appeared on all screens, rippling with urgency. "Commander Zixthal, we have a situation. The Crimson Nebula pirates have hijacked a civilian transport vessel in your sector. All other response teams are engaged elsewhere. Your training squad is the closest unit available." Zixthal's exoskeleton went pale. "Admiral, with all due respect, these cadets aren't ready for." Sweet, Martinez interrupted, already checking his equipment with surprising efficiency. "Real pirates. This is going to be better than that time we had to stop the space zombies." There's no such thing as Space Zom NX-427 began, before being gently patted on their quantum processing unit by Martinez. "That's exactly what the zombies wanted us to think," the human whispered conspiratorially. The Admiral's form wobbled with what might have been amusement or concern. "The civilian vessel contains delegates from 17 different systems. Standard protocols dictate." "We'll handle it," Martinez said, with that terrifying human confidence that made Zixthal's stress fractures develop stress fractures. "Quick question though, how do you feel about extremely unorthodox rescue operations?" The Admiral's form shifted to a deep shade of resignation. "Just try to keep the property damage within acceptable limits this time." As they boarded their response vessel, Zixthal tried to maintain some semblance of order. "We will follow standard hostile engagement protocols. The manual clearly states." "Quick question," Martinez interrupted, somehow managing to suit up while simultaneously reconfiguring his helmet systems with another paperclip. "These pirates, they've probably studied all the standard protocols, right?" The 3 Zephyrians buzzed in alarm. "That's why we have protocols. They're proven to work in." "But if they know what we're going to do," Martinez continued, that dangerous glint in his eyes, "then maybe we should do something they won't expect. Something absolutely bonkers." No, Zixthal's forearms moved in the universal gesture for absolutely not. "We are not going to improvise during a real crisis. This isn't a training exercise." "Exactly," Martinez grinned, pulling out his ever-present coffee container. "This is where the fun begins. Hold my coffee, Commander." Those words sent shivers through every alien present. They had learned that "hold my coffee" was the human equivalent of about to do something that violates several laws of physics. The pirate vessel came into view, a massive battlecruiser that dwarfed their training ship. Standard protocols dictated a careful approach, communication attempts, and if necessary, precise disabling shots to non-critical systems. Martinez had other ideas. "Hey," he said, studying the tactical display, "you know how the artificial gravity generators can be reversed?" "That is not an approved combat strategy," Prism 9 chimed in panic. "Neither is this," Martinez said, beginning to type commands into his console with alarming speed. "I'm going to need 3 emergency hull foam canisters, all the paper clips we have, and someone to explain to me why no one's ever weaponized the coffee maker's heating element." What followed would later be classified as Incident 47B and required the creation of 67 new emergency protocols, most of which began with "under no circumstances should human suggestions be implemented without proper review." Martinez somehow managed to create a makeshift electromagnetic pulse using the ship's coffee maker and what he called the power of caffeine-induced inspiration. Use the reversed gravity generators to create what he termed a space slingshot. Turn the emergency hull foam into an improvised boarding mechanism that NX-427 insisted violated at least 4 laws of thermodynamics. The pirates, expertly prepared for every standard protocol in the manual, had absolutely no defense against what their captain later described as pure chaos given form. "This is impossible," the pirate leader shouted as Martinez's improvised gravity weapon turned their own artificial gravity against them. "You can't weaponize artificial gravity like that. It's not physically possible." "That's what the space zombies said too," Martinez called back cheerfully, using the emergency hull foam to create what he called a slip and slide through the pirate ship's corridors. And look what happened to them. The Zephyrians, despite their initial horror, found themselves reluctantly admitting that Martinez's solution was terrifyingly effective as they watched pirates floating helplessly in patches of reversed gravity, unable to reach their weapons. Prism 9, who had been calculating the probability of success, actually crashed briefly when Martinez used a combination of emergency flares and precision timing to create what he called a disco distraction. A rescue operation is not supposed to have a soundtrack. Zyxthal wailed as human music called Stayin' Alive somehow began playing through the pirate ship's communication systems. "Everything's better with a soundtrack," Martinez insisted, using his helmet to ricochet it off a wall and take down 3 pirates with what he claimed was a move I learned from watching old Earth movies. The civilian delegates, expecting a long and frightening hostage situation, were instead treated to the sight of their rescue involving what appeared to be a human turning artificial gravity into a weapon, emergency equipment into improvised zip lines, and somehow managing to subdue an entire pirate crew while humming something called Mission Impossible again. "Is this normal for human operations?" one of the delegates asked Zyxthal, watching as Martinez used the pirate ship's own fire suppression system to create what he called a foam party. "There is nothing normal about humans," Zyxthal replied, his exoskeleton now displaying colors that hadn't been seen since the Great Confusion of the Third Era. "Nothing at all." As they secured the last of the pirates, Martinez retrieved his coffee container from Zyxthal's still shocked grip. "See? Sometimes you have to think outside the protocol box. Though I have to admit, I didn't expect the coffee maker to work quite that well as an EMP device. Really adds a kick to the rescue operation, don't you think?" The sound of NX-427's logic circuits frying was drowned out by the Zephyrians' electromagnetic distress signals and Prism 9's harmonious scream of "Physics has rules." "Rules," Martinez said, taking a victory sip of his coffee, "are more like guidelines anyway. Hey, who wants to learn how to drift race a battlecruiser?" The collective groan of despair from every alien present was noted in official records as the great lament of training group Epsilon. "You know what would be really cool?" Martinez asked, surveying the bridge of the captured pirate ship. The question made every alien present instinctively brace for impact. "Please," Zyxthal begged, all 4 arms raised in surrender. "No more cool ideas. We've won. The pirates are captured. The delegates are safe. Let's just..." The emergency alert cut him off. 3 more pirate vessels had just dropped out of hyperspace, their weapons already charging. "Perfect timing," Martinez exclaimed with alarming enthusiasm. "I've always wanted to try the gravity well maneuver." The what maneuver? NX-427's logical processors sparked in preemptive distress. "It's simple," Martinez explained, already reconfiguring the ship's systems in ways that made several fundamental laws of physics file formal protests. "We're going to use the emergency quantum stabilizers to create a localized gravity well, then combine it with the artificial gravity generators to make a sort of space whirlpool." Prism 9 vibrated in frequencies previously unknown to science. "That's not. You can't. Gravity doesn't." "Watch me," Martinez grinned, pulling out another paperclip from what seemed to be an infinite supply. "First, we're going to need all the emergency beacon transmitters, and maybe some duct tape." What followed would later be redacted from most official reports, as several species claimed the description alone violated their religious beliefs about the sanctity of physical laws. Martinez somehow managed to convert the ship's emergency quantum stabilizers into what he called a gravity slingshot, use the cafeteria's food synthesizers to create an impromptu particle accelerator, turn the ship's waste disposal system into what he termed a physics persuasion device. "This isn't happening," Zyxthal muttered, watching as Martinez's gravity well began to form. This cannot be happening. "Oh, it's happening," Martinez called out cheerfully, typing commands faster than seemed physically possible. "Hey, did you know if you reverse the polarity of the artificial gravity and sync it with the quantum stabilizers, you can make space do backflips?" The Zephyrians, who had been maintaining a defensive electromagnetic field, suddenly shifted to broadcasting pure existential dread on all frequencies. The pirate ships, approaching in standard attack formation, never stood a chance against whatever laws of physics Martinez was currently rewriting. The gravity well, combined with what Martinez called a little razzle-dazzle, created a swirling vortex of spatial distortion that looked suspiciously like a giant cosmic toilet flush. "This defies all known laws of spatial dynamics," NX 427 screamed, their logical circuits smoking. "Laws of spatial dynamics meet human innovation," Martinez replied, adding yet another paperclip to his increasingly concerning collection of jury-rigged systems. "Now watch this, I call it the triple Lindy of death." The pirate ships, caught in the gravity well, began to spin in ways that made several geometry teachers across the galaxy wake up screaming. The vortex, powered by what Martinez claimed was the power of coffee and human ingenuity, pulled them into a spiral that somehow managed to tie their ship's engines into actual knots. That's not possible," Prism 9 chimed weakly. "You can't tie space into knots." "Tell that to the knots," Martinez winked, adding a final command that made the gravity well collapse in on itself with a flourish that several physicists would later describe as offensively improbable. The result was spectacular in its absurdity. The pirate ships, their engines hopelessly tangled in spatial distortions that shouldn't exist, crashed into each other in what Martinez described as the galaxy's first synchronized space swimming accident. The bridge was silent for a long moment, broken only by the sound of Martinez sipping his seemingly endless supply of coffee and the quiet whimpers of traumatized alien cadets. "Well," Martinez said brightly, "that worked better than expected. Though I have to admit, I didn't think the food synthesizer would make such a good particle accelerator. Must be all the artificial flavoring." Zixthal, his exoskeleton now displaying colors that hadn't been seen since the birth of the universe, finally found his voice. What did you do?" "Oh, you know." "No." Martinez shrugged, already starting to dismantle his improvised physics violation devices, "just a little creative problem solving. Though we might want to avoid this sector for a while, I think we accidentally created a few temporary quantum anomalies. Nothing serious. Just some spots where time might flow backwards on Tuesdays." The Zephyrians, still broadcasting existential dread, had begun composing what would later become known as the Ballad of "Oh God, Why?" NX 427, having given up on understanding the situation through logic, had resorted to repeatedly muttering error 404 physics not found. Prism 9, whose crystalline structure had developed several new facets from pure stress, simply chimed in harmonies that translated roughly to "I should have become a space accountant." "Look on the bright side," Martinez said, collecting his paperclips. "At least we didn't have to use Plan B." "There was a Plan B?" Zixthal asked, immediately regretting the question. "Oh yeah, I was thinking we could use the waste recycling system to create a sort of improvised matter-antimatter reactor. You know, really get creative with it." The sound that followed a combination of alien screams, electromagnetic distress signals, and the death rattle of several fundamental physical laws was classified as a new form of psychological warfare. The commendation ceremony was unlike any in the Academy's 10,000-year history. For one thing, it was the first time the word technically had been used 17 times in a single medal presentation. And so Admiral Velox announced, her gelatinous form shifting through various shades of diplomatic uncertainty, "We honor Cadet Martinez for his creative solution to the crisis, though we must emphasize that this commendation in no way endorses or encourages the methods used." Martinez stood at attention, somehow managing to maintain perfect posture while still looking completely relaxed. The other cadets maintained a safe distance of exactly 7.3 meters, a number they had calculated as the minimum safe range from what they now called human inspiration radius. Furthermore, the Admiral continued, the Academy has found it necessary to update several thousand protocols, most of which now begin with the phrase "in the event of human involvement." The new regulations included such specific items as: coffee makers are no longer classified as non-tactical equipment. Paperclips must be registered as potential engineering tools. The phrase "hold my coffee" is now considered a code red warning. Zixthal, watching from the audience with his newly reinforced exoskeleton, the stress fractures had required extensive crystal therapy. They noted with resignation that they'd had to create an entirely new section in the Academy handbook titled "Why Because Physics Says So" is no longer a valid argument. In light of recent events, the Admiral continued, her form rippling with what might have been suppressed laughter. Commander Zixthal has announced his immediate retirement to pursue his lifelong dream of quantum architecture. Though we must note his new project appears to be designing buildings that are, quote, human-proof. The commander's exoskeleton flushed a deep shade of traumatized mauve. He'd already started work on a retreat center for instructors who had experienced what was now officially termed human innovation stress disorder. Finally, the Admiral concluded, "We are instituting a new Academy-wide policy regarding beverage consumption in zero gravity, specifically addressing the innovative use of coffee as a propulsion system enhancement." Martinez, accepting his medal, couldn't resist adding, "With a few modifications, we could probably use the coffee machine to create a localized wormhole." The collective gasp of horror from the assembled alien cadets caused 3 different atmospheric processors to activate their emergency protocols. As the ceremony concluded, NX-427 approached Martinez with what appeared to be a peace offering, a carefully calculated safe distance of 7.4 meters away. "I've been analyzing your methods," they admitted, and while they violate approximately 73.2% of known physical laws, I cannot argue with their effectiveness. "That's the spirit," Martinez beamed. "Want to help me test a new theory about using emergency flares to create temporary time dilation?" The sound of NX-427's hasty retreat broke several Academy speed records. Zixthal, preparing to leave for his new human-free life, found one last cup of coffee on his desk. Next to it was a note. "Thanks for everything, Commander. P.S. Did you know that if you reconfigure the quantum messaging system just right, you can use it to heat coffee across space-time? I left instructions in the manual under things that should not be possible, but humans did anyway, Volume 1. The commander's final act before departure was to add one last entry to the Academy's training protocols. "Remember, in space, no one can hear you scream. Unless a human decides to test acoustic properties in vacuum using the emergency broadcast system and 3 paperclips." And somewhere in the Academy halls, a new generation of alien cadets learned to listen for the dreaded sound of coffee being prepared in zero gravity, now universally recognized as the precursor to physics having a very bad day indeed.